Living is an adventure and a challenge. It wasn't about standing still and becoming safe. But I've always been the way I am, been like this all my life. If anybody wants to keep creating, they have to be about change.
Miles Davis, it's a big subject. You know, I consider Miles to be one of the most influential and important artists of the 20th century. I put him up there with Stravinsky. Picasso. Duke Ellington. Stevie Wonder. Miles, it's 5 decades. He left behind such a legacy. So many recordings, both studio and live, and people still writing dissertations and theses, solos still being transcribed. Is a guy that changed not only his own direction, but music itself 5 or 6 times. So really, you know, instead of just my little one-man YouTube channel, Miles deserves like a 10, 15 episode Ken Burns style documentary, you know? Just don't let Ken Burns do it, because he'll just hand it to Wynton Marsalis and it'll end in the 50s and you'll miss a lot of good stuff. But Miles, I mean, you know, I said 5 decades. I've been listening to Miles for over 50 years. You know, 50 years ago in 1975, I had a jazz fusion band in Laramie, Wyoming. And one of the tunes we used to play was Black Satin from On the Corner. Everybody wanted to be Miles, because he was so cool. Everybody... You know, and you can't fake that. You either have that or you're not. You can go find all the big sunglasses that you can, and you're just going to be, you're not going to carry it. Miles was just, like I said, he was just so influential, not just in the music, but just the way he presented himself. There were 3 things about Miles that made him become one of my personal heroes. And one was his courage. Miles was fearless. Whether he was just taking a solo and trying to play something that he'd never played before, or completely changing the direction of his music and risking alienating his public and the critics and all of that, which happened many times. He was fearless. The music told him where to go, and he was restless, and he did not like to repeat himself. And that takes a lot of courage, because music is just intrinsically mixed up with performance and has that show business aspect that, you know, your public expects to, you know, when someone goes to a Stevie Wonder concert, and if he doesn't play Superstition, they're going to be saying, well, he didn't play Superstition. You know, that kind of thing. So there's a pressure on artists that Miles chose to ignore. He had the biggest selling jazz album of all time with Kind of Blue. And it was just a few years after that he dropped those tunes from his set list, because he was on to new stuff. That takes courage, a lot of courage. The second thing that made him a hero of mine is his originality and his search to find his own true voice. And all the musicians that worked with him, he encouraged them to be the same. And I've got up here on the screen one of his sayings. Is that sometimes you have to play a long time to be able to play like yourself. Ain't that the truth? Because I'm still trying to play like myself. I'm not sure what that is. To thine own self be true, but who knows what your own self is. It takes a long time to find that. You might not find it. Miles did it. He established his style, and even though he changed his direction, and he changed the settings of his music and the genre of his music many, many times, you could always tell it was Miles. It might seem like a dichotomy to say that Miles could change his music so radically and still be Miles, but he was changing his musical environment. If you think of that as a geographic environment, you know, Miles traveled to market in Cairo or to Paris or to Africa, he's still going to be Miles. And he put himself in different environments, and his style would adapt to those, but he was still Miles, always. And I'll prove that point if you stick around a minute. The third thing that made Miles my hero is that he had an open mind for his entire life. He was open to new things. And the reason that there's sitars and tabla drums on the corner and another one of his records, I forget which one, but he had just been exposed to Indian music. And he said, oh man, you know, he loved that sound, and he incorporated that.
He said, I'm gonna mix tablas and sitar.
He was open. You know, when he went electric, he took no end of grief from critics and a lot of the public too, you know, the so-called jazz purists and whatnot. But it was his open mind that made him love the music of Sly Stone, of Jimi Hendrix. He adored Prince. He loved Prince. And he just had that open mind that was always there. And I think that's an essential ingredient, because if your mind is closed to new experiences and new kinds of music, it's just really sad, you know? I mean, I've got friends that are my age, and you know, you can tell just by going through their record collection what year their mind closed. And the last record they bought was the Eagles' Greatest Hits. Well, it was 1976. It's been a long time since they've been able to enjoy something new. I try to keep an open mind because it's essential. You got to. Because everything's changing. We're changing. There isn't a cell in your body that was there 7 years ago. I mean, it's life changes every second. Miles goes full-blown electric with Bitches Brew, and the critics have a fit, or else they see it for the masterpiece that it is. Stanley Crouch accused Miles of selling out, it's stupid. You can't. How can you sell out? This is a guy that said, I'm not going to spend the rest of my life playing My Funny Valentine. And he took chances of alienating the public and the critics by switching up directions, because he just was an explorer, and he kept moving in different directions. And he wound up, the things that were speaking to him, he was listening to rock music. He was listening to Sly Stone. He was listening to Jimi Hendrix. He was listening to Cream do 20 minutes on a blues song. And he wanted to take away the structure and let the music be free and improvised, and then later through editing he and Teal could find a structure. And that's what they did so well with Bitches Brew. And Bitches Brew can be a difficult listen at first. Because it's so different, and it's just so bizarre. And I can imagine how it caught everybody off guard. I came up in the 70s, so it was like, for me, the Electric Miles was the how I first encountered him. I'd heard sketches of Spain, you know, earlier in the 60s, but wasn't really paying attention. But then the electric stuff came in, and that was right up my alley, because that was the time, and it was the right place, you know. And Miles winds up playing at the Isle of Wight Festival in front of 600,000 people. And even though he went into this direction, he still attracted all the musicians. He fostered so many fantastic musicians that came through his band. The list is crazy, but I mean, just the keyboard players. At one time, he had Joe Zawinul, Keith Jarrett, and Chick Corea playing at the same time. Forget about it. He's got John McLaughlin. He's so many fantastic musicians that went through Miles's band, and I love to listen to their stories, because they all speak of him with such love and devotion and respect. You know, I love to hear, I love to see YouTube clips of John McLaughlin or Herbie or Chick or any of those people talking about working with Miles, because they've got great stories. They all have great stories, and they all learn so much from him. And I learned so much from him. I didn't play with him, but just listening and the concepts and what he called directions in music by Miles Davis. That's what you hear on those records. And he was a force of nature. He was amazing. Just to show that Miles could be in different environment and it would still be Miles, to thine own self be true, and that he didn't sell out, thank you very much. I used stem separation software and isolated his trumpet from 3 different recordings, one from the 50s, one from the 60s, and one from the 70s. Let me play that for you. I'm not going to say what it is, but just listen to the isolated trumpet and try to guess what, you know, is this from the 50s, is it the 60s, is it the 70s? Here's one. Now, here's another one. Okay, and another. Boom. Yeah, all 3 of those. I chose those of him just playing open trumpet without the Harmon mute or a wah-wah pedal, just to hear his tone. The first one I played was the last one. It was from the 70s. That's from Miles Runs the Voodoo Down from Bitches Brew. The second one I played was Hand Jive from Nefertiti. And the first one is from So What from Kinda Blue. And all of them, you can hear that it's Miles. And he's rooted in the blues, and he's got that beautiful, big, full, open tone, no vibrato, and it's unmistakably Miles. He stayed Miles even though he changed, and he kept going. And how many people can do that? You know, reinvent yourself and change music. You know, one of the coolest things, John McLaughlin tells this story, that after he'd been working with Miles for a while, Miles said to him, "John, I think it's time that you started your own group." And McLaughlin said he was just blown away by that, because Miles had more confidence in him than he had in himself at the time. And Miles was telling him that you can do this. So he did, and so because of that, we got Mahavishnu Orchestra. They were incredible, mighty, and awesome. I mean, think about it. Herbie Hancock and the Headhunters. It all came out of Miles. Corea, Return to Forever. Wayne Shorter and Zawin will go on and form Weather Report. I mean, the whole jazz fusion thing. It probably would have happened, but it would have been a lot different if not for Miles. Miles shaped that, and he pointed the way. And the sixth phase that Miles went into was his Warner Brothers period. And that's greatly misunderstood. And again, people were screaming that Miles has sold out because he's playing Cyndi Lauper and Michael Jackson songs. What is this, you know? Well, what it is Miles was concerned that there weren't any new standards being created. Because, you know, standards are the lingua franca of jazz musicians. It's what they play. You get together for a jam session, you say, you call Autumn Leaves, you know, or Embraceable You, All the Things You Are, whatever. There's, you know, all those songs. But Miles was concerned that there weren't new standards because everybody's writing their own stuff and they're doing their own thing. And he's worried about where are the new standards coming from. And the way a song becomes a standard is if somebody influential covers it. I mean, all those tunes that are in the so-called Great American Songbook, you know, they came out of Broadway shows or movie musicals, right? But in that era, in the 80s, there weren't new standards being made. So Miles went looking around for songs that he liked the melody, that he thought could become new standards if he showed the way. So that's why he did Cyndi Lauper's Time After Time, because that song has a beautiful melody. He did a cover of Michael Jackson's Human Nature, because again, it's a beautiful song, and it should be a standard. He covered Scritti Politti, Perfect Way, which is a very hip tune. So that's what he was doing. He wasn't selling out. He was trying to wake people up to don't sleep on playing other people's stuff. Don't get so involved in writing your own stuff and neglecting other tunes that might be cool. You know, I mean, it's important. So that whole thing was misunderstood. Miles Davis was an amazing person. I got to meet him finally, and I was scared to approach him, but I did. He was at the Shrine Auditorium for the Grammys in 1984. I was nominated, and in the lobby, you know, they taped they presented the awards for all the stuff they weren't going to put on the main telecast for like the R&B and the jazz and the spoken word stuff. They did all that in the afternoon. And so all the jazz people and the R&B people are in the lobby of the Shrine Auditorium waiting to go in to do that part. And I look across and I see Miles over there. I thought, man, I've got to just shake his hand, you know. And it was intimidating because he had a reputation, you know, for years musicians would approach him if they just saw him on the street, and he could be very brusque and unkind, but he was so gracious. I just went up to him and I thanked him for the music. And he shook my hand, and he was just gracious and warm and kind, and he asked me what I was about my record. And it was so cool. I saw him live a couple of times. I saw him at when I was going to Berkeley in Boston. I saw him at Paul's Mall, and I got there early, and I got a table right up front, in front of the bandstand, and Miles spent most of the time facing the band, not the audience, as was his habit. And he'd turn around and empty the spit valve, and it would land on my table. My table was consecrated, baptized by Miles Davis' spit. Then I saw him again at the Greek Theater, and one of those tunes wound up on his Live Around the World record, so you can hear me hollering and cheering. But I just love and respect Miles Davis, and I was glad that when I did the video about using a Miles Davis production trick, that so many people responded to it, and they wanted to hear me speak about Miles. So since I am a musician who was influenced by Miles, I recorded a cover of one of the tunes that he did shortly before he went electric. But I reimagined it as if he had recorded it 5 years later. So I'll close with that, and thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Adios.